Okay, today I'm going to be talking about long vowels. Long vowels are something that exist in some languages, but uh, not all languages. I don't know the exact percentage of languages that have long vowels and versus don't have long vowels. Um, for some languages, the difference between long vowels and short vowels is allophonic. In other languages, it might be like there's a specific contrast. In some languages, they have long and short vowels, but none of them have the same quality. And in some languages, uh, mainly mainly Gothic. Because this channel is focused on Gothic and it's trying to teach you Gothic. Um, I should say that the way Gothic long vowels work is that they don't really contrast with the short vowels. Um, I, there are not very many words in which there's like this, um, in which there's a contrast between long and short. Um, like, so here I have some like pairs of words which are contrasted in that one of them is short, one of them is long. You might notice that in German, we have the short bitten versus long beaten, this long e versus I, and this I is like in English pit, and this e is similar to the English like peat. Um, One thing about English though is that our e is more like I have the wrong keyboard. Our e is more of a diphthong, and this is true in both like dialects of British English and dialects of American English. I think it's the more common way to distinguish A from E across both. But in German and most likely Gothic, it would just be this long E, 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 E without an A, A. Like it's not a diphthong. It's not like tree, which has a ya at the end. It's hard to hear, especially, I mean, if you're not like that knowledgeable or like, if you don't have like linguistics training to actually be able to hear this. Um, it is kind of subtle, but in an earlier video, I showed the contrast between like where say, if you play it in reverse, it sounds like yes. Um, but today I want to like focus more on length. Now, length is a pretty tricky thing to do right. Um, One thing that I'll often do are, and that you might do as well if you're trying to learn Gothic, but your native language doesn't have long versus short contrast, is you might pronounce the vowels which are long as too long. So, um, like let's say we have the word brothar, brothar. Um, this O is long, but long vowels aren't actually that much longer than short vowels. They're typically a little less than twice as long. So when you're trying to pronounce the long vowels and the short vowels different, you might end up like pronouncing them way too long and like sort of exaggerating them, which is not what you like want to be doing. Um, but if your native language doesn't have that long vowel contrast, it can be like hard to pronounce that correctly. One thing that's good to do is to get a good understanding of how your native language works. Because if you don't really understand how your native language works, then you don't really know how to like change what you're doing in order to be closer to like the language that you want to speak well. Um, Obviously, I can't have every single possible native language here. I tried to have a few, the ones that I thought, were most relevant. First, I have British English. Now, the reason I chose British English is because it does have this long vowel, short vowel contrast. It doesn't really work the same way as Gothic does, though. So another thing to keep in mind is that the words feet and Luke have this, as I said before, it's this, it's more like in most dialects, it's more like a, ooh, with ooh, a. I'm exaggerating it here, but it's e, ooh, and if that just sounds normal to you, uh, it's because of it. It's like I'm just saying it normally. E, ooh, e, ooh, versus e, ooh, where the where it's not a diphthong, where it's just a monophthong. So I'm going to be trying to pronounce these as monophthongs, um, even though how exactly it's pronounced might vary by dialect. So another thing to keep in mind is that we have something that's called a long vowel, like a long short, where it's like, for example, face, this a. Um, it's written with an A, but it's actually a diphthong which starts somewhere around here and then goes is somewhere around here. It's a. The same thing with um, how we have what's a good example? Uh, time versus the name Tim. So the word time is spelled with an I, and you might consider that a long I, like AEIOU, um, are the names of the vowel letters, but actually it starts somewhere around here, and again goes somewhere around here. This I. So it's not actually, it doesn't actually have anything to do in the modern day uh, with the long which is closer to how you pronounce the name of the letter E. So in English, we have A, E, I, O, U as the names of the letters. But in German, for example, it might be more like A, E, I, O, U. And those, correspond to how those letters are pronounced in most languages that use the Latin alphabet. English is sort of an exception because of the great vowel shift happening at around the same time that spelling was starting to become standardized. So when I'm talking about long vowels here, I'm not talking about this A, E, I, O, U, where, they're long because they historically were long. I'm talking about E, E, O, U, which is like the closest thing we have to what Gothic has, but it's a little bit different. In any case, I'll start with British English. So keep in mind, I don't speak British English. I'm just going to try my best based on this transcription, which may or may not be right. So we have fit versus feet. We have look versus look. We have Mary versus Mary. Oh crap! I'm throwing the R because that's how it is in Gothic. Oh well. Mary, Mary, Mary is how they say Mary. I would pronounce both of these the same. I would just say Mary. But in this specific dialect of British English, it's Mary versus Mary, and the long one is like the name, and the short one is like, um, happy. And then here we have short versus short, and we have stat versus start. And I probably pronounced those pretty badly, but I'm going to show you. So the closest thing to Gothic for each of these, first of all, we have e and e, e. That's the closest thing Gothic has. And depending on the accent, that might be exactly how Gothic has it. Gothic writes both short U and long U with this letter, but in some words it's short, some words it's long. So you just have to memorize which U's are short and long. Um, so I'm pretty, yeah, I meant to do that. I meant to, sorry. This is closest to Gothic and I think this is the what's being transcribed as that there. Um, and then we have this, which is closest to Gothic, O. And like I said, depending on the dialect, it might be the same. Uh, long versus short isn't really indicated. Um, but oh well. And then the closest thing we have is to this all is this a, and it's written like that. And the thing is, right, this back a is further. It might be further back. It might be the same position as this a, but I would probably try to pronounce it here. Not that you have to. It's not really something we can really tell. Um, but I mean, you could pronounce it all the way back here and wouldn't really be obviously wrong or even, a particularly bad guess. Um, Here we have a. Um, I'm pronouncing this the same way I pronounce in my dialect of English, but according to this, my is over here. So I don't know how accurate that is, but it doesn't really matter because Gothic probably isn't this. Um, it's probably pronounced the same place around here, whether it's short or long. But all we know is that it's used to transcribe in Latin and Greek, and that in Proto-Germanic. It was probably further back around here at some point, but that we don't really have much evidence, I don't think. Okay, next we have something which is a bit more like my dialect of English. Uh, it's General American. I would describe my speech as General American, but the thing about General American is it's hard to say what specifically it refers to. For example, this doesn't have the cot merger, and you might be able to tell I do have the cot merger. There's an there's some other like distinctions between my speech and this, and I don't know exactly where my vowel qualities are in compared to this, but they should be in around the same place. One thing that I've noticed about my speech is that this vowel, put, or took, or look. I don't think I actually round my mouth, even though this would indicate that it's pronounced with the rounded lips. So this IPA symbol would indicate that this word look is pronounced look, 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 something like that. Whereas I pronounce it without rounded lips. I don't know exactly if I'm pronouncing this right when I say look, because, like I said, it's not how I don't think I do it like that natively. So I'll just talk about the different vowels. Um, let's see. First we have fit and feet, which is the same thing as I use the first two. I mean, it's the same language. It's English, so I didn't need to do that differently. But um, for fit and feet, so I'm not sure exactly how I say feet. It might be more like it could be more like it could be like this. It could be like this. It could be like this. I'm not sure which one I pronounce it like. Um, I can open Pratt and try to see new record mono sound. Feet, feet, and then reverse it, and maybe I'll hear a yeah, maybe I won't. Leaf, leaf, leaf. Now I don't know about you, but I just hear ETH is what I hear. But that should be an F, so maybe I'm just hearing it wrong. Leaf. Oh yeah, that is an F. So I don't know. Um, I think I actually pronounced this T as like a glottal stop. So this isn't the IPA symbol for a glottal stop, but whatever. More like feet, feet, like where there's. So it's more like eef. I'll try that. I'll say eef. But I did not actually hear a yeah, so I don't know. Eef. I didn't like that one. I'll try again. Eef. I think I saved it to list twice, but whatever. Eef. Feet. 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 Now, I don't know about you, but I hear feet. So maybe I know some languages, especially German, tend to, instead of starting words with vowels, they actually insert a glottal stop. That's not what I'm focusing on in this video. Whether Gothic would do that, I have no idea. One thing that might suggest that that's how old Germanic languages did that is the fact that vowels tend to alliterate with each other, which is kind of strange. Um, so if we were speaking, old, like if we were writing Old English poetry, feet and fit would alliterate. Um, but then uh, oat and eat and it would all alliterate with each other, which is kind of interesting. So maybe it was a clonal stop, or maybe it's I don't know. Um, we don't really have sound recordings from that, but maybe the glottal stop development in German was like this own separate thing, um, and I think English does it too. So that could be why it sounds like I'm saying feet when I say eth in reverse. I can let's see what would be good to like test that out. Like cat, maybe it'll sound uh like tat, like maybe it'll sound like ack. That's cat. not exactly sure how it works in English. Maybe it's more like um, some languages have this like not like a this is the symbol for a true R. I don't actually have the tab, but it might be that. It's I don't know. But like for example, in butter, like supposedly the same sound as in Spanish, pero, pero. So, or at least very similar. Um, but I haven't really studied that. Cat, cat, nah, nah. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It sounds like ash, ash. I don't know what's up with that. Um, ash, ash, shat, shat. Yeah, that doesn't sound like cat. I don't know what sound that is, but what I can do is say ack, ack, cat, cat, cat. That does not sound like cat at all, I have to be honest, but whatever. Um, I'll see how tack sounds in reverse. Tack, tack, clasp, clasp. Yeah, I don't know what's up with that. I don't know why the consonants sound so weird in reverse. But no. Well. So then we have look and look, look. We have fed and um. It says E and O are monophthongal allophones of A and O. Um, so whether this is A or whether it's A, I'm not really sure um, how I would pronounce. I can do fade and coat and see how that turns out. Fade, fade, riff, 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 riff. I'm not sure. I think it's Jeff or Jeff rather. Um, Jeff, something like that. I'll 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 try saying Jeff in the thing. Jeff, Jeff, face, face. I have no idea why the consonants get messed up so much. I really cannot hear them as consonants. Um, fade, fade. Husbeef, husbeef, husbeef. I did have a bit of a schwa at the end there. But oh well. I guess I'll do coat now. Coat. I tried to pronounce the T stronger than I usually would. Coat. Woof, woof. I'm. I think I am saying it like this, coat, as opposed to because it sounded like I'm pretty sure I heard a wa there. Oh, but uh, more likely out that would be in Gothic if we're talking about this this O and this E, and you might notice that I'm using this E and O letter as opposed to this because it's actually um, a different place in the mouth. So feed, court, feed, court, oh, leaf. I'm not really sure what that was. It's kind of hard to. It sounds really weird in reverse. And once again, this is the same because I don't really know that they're really that different in British and American English. But this has them written differently, where it has the long vowel marker. Whether that's an actual distinction or whether that's just something that's done, I don't know. One thing about my dialect of English, and is a definite distinction between British English and American English, is that this vowel is long in British English, and in American English it's short. So um, in British English you would say start, but if that was a word in American English, um, we would just say like start um, with a short vowel. Uh, Gothic does have like a distinction between short and long Um, I think sort of more similar to Gothic than any dialect of English is German, but German has its own distinctions. Mainly in that it doesn't really have a long O and like a long O or and the long E isn't really like, like it's only in some words, and in most words I think it's merged with A, or I should say for most speakers it's merged with A. Um, but an example of that would be the word. Hopefully, I'll spell this right. But Dänemark, Dänemark. So presumably, you know, like the sort of like, I guess, I don't know if it's like the standard or what you would call it, but in any case, if you're pronouncing this differently, it would be a long whereas some speakers might just say Dänemark. So that's something to keep in mind. Now German has these front rounded vowels, U, E, but they're not in Gothic, so I'm just going to ignore them. Um, I would say if you're like going for one language to try to get as close to Gothic as you can, in terms of the vowels at least, I would say German, but just keep in mind the lack of the O and E. So German has a, it's I have to say that German spelling is a lot more consistent than English. So you will see that not only, well, I guess English is kind of weird in that you have like stuff like the letter A, which is usually in just an ah sound in most languages, can be like an E, um, but in German it's an ah sound. So that's, something that's, and also the English does something very similar where, uh, for example, we distinguish later from latter. So this shows both of the distinctions. Um, like uh, so like in English, German can use a double consonant to indicate a short vowel. It can also use a double vowel to indicate a long vowel, and English works very similarly. But the actual long vowels have, you know, changed since the because of the Great Vowel Shift, and that's indicated in spelling. Or well, I mean, it isn't indicated in spelling that they've changed. Um, what I meant is that the you can tell by the spelling that there it hasn't that it isn't indicated in spelling that it there was a Great Vowel Shift. Um, but if you compare spelling to pronunciation, you can tell that there was a great vowel shift. I could have worded that better, but hopefully you know what I mean. Um, so German, bitten versus beaten, uh, Budel versus Budel, bet versus bet, and for some of these it was pretty difficult to find. Um, I think both of these are dialectical, like one's only used in northern Germany, one's only used in like Austria or something like that. Um, but Pudel, Pudel, and I might be pronouncing those as overlong. I can't really tell. I'm recording right. Uh, yeah, I'd be a bit upset if I spent a half hour talking to no one, but whatever. Um, and we have Gotha versus Gotha. This is actually the word for goth. But mostly I want to like show. Okay, so this O is corresponds to this sort of X with a closed top in Gothic, which well, it doesn't correspond to that in the sense that if you see this in a Gothic word, that doesn't mean then it'll be the same. Like for example, goth is actually has a short U, so woot, wuta, like over here. Um, and funnily enough, the word goth is actually it's here, but it's actually pronounced with a U, like gut. So if you look at Gothic words to German words, the U, O, and the for example, you have the word means, 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 which corresponds to German and English mine. Das ist mein. That's mine. Where both German and English um, have this like diphthong, whereas in Gothic it's a monophthong. Um, Gothic also has like, for example, whose, whose with a long oo, but then both German and English have house slash house. Um, so both German and English have diphthongs there. Um, uh, German and English went through a sound change where U before A becomes O, a short O. So we have, for example, Wolf and Wolf, whereas in Gothic you would have Wolves. So there happen a lot of like sound changes in between like Proto-Germanic and uh, modern Germanic languages, and so that's something to keep in mind because this was actually originally uh, Wolfaz, Wolfaz, and this A caused a mutation to become that, and then you have get this, and then did that happen in Old English? I'm not really sure. Um, I can't remember if it was like a Proto-West Germanic thing or if it only happened in a few languages or how exact because I'm more knowledgeable in Gothic. But this Wolfaz becomes Ulfa, and Gothic does not actually have a short O. There's no short O in Gothic. Um, at least not. Well, what I mean to say is it doesn't have a short. Um, what I meant to say is Proto-Germanic doesn't have any short O. Um, but Gothic does because there was a sound change where, for example, we have this word, and that becomes. So Gothic does actually have a short O, and it's here and also in like some loan words where if there's a short O, it'll also use this. Um, and this also is another example where wordong becomes a word. And the reason it becomes word is because this A causes a mutation on the U. And but in Gothic, it also becomes word with an O sound because the R causes the U to lower to here. Um, oh yeah, I was doing this. I get sidetracked a lot, but I think it's a good thing because then I can like talk about things. Um, and I think it's more educational if I do. So here we have Stadt versus Staat. So um, here is an example of something where if you don't distinguish between short and long vowels, it might just sound like they're pronounced the same, like oh Stadt, Stadt. What's the difference? Um, you might like so when I was learning German, I did not realize that, for example, the A in Mann was shorter than the A in Bahnhof. Bahnhof. Um, if you don't really pay attention to the vowel length, it can, you might not realize that. But, eventually you will get like a sense for that, like one is longer. Um, but that can take a long time. I'm not really sure how good I am at that. Um, I can, open Wiktionary and uh, let's just listen to these words on Wiktionary.
bitten,
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 Versus this word.
bieten, bieten,
Now, I don't know about you, but this does not sound long. So I feel like the most likely explanation for that is that I don't actually I like pronounce the long vowels correctly. I feel like I pronounce them over long, and because like it's not something that I can really like hear very easily. So, and it's not a distinction I make in my native language.
bieten,
So that sounds short to me, but um, you know, uh,
buddel, buddel,
so that should be short. And then let's see. So here it says it's long, but I'll have to find a word where it's actually
Gut.
That's English, not German. Uh,
Gut. Gut.
Gut,
Here it sounds really long.
gut,
So I don't know. I don't know. Um, but I'll just go to bet,
Bett.
and that should sound close to the English word bet with one T. But let's see if there's an article. I mean,
Bet. Bet. Bet.
so you might. I'm assuming you're an English speaker, like an English native speaker. Um, but I really don't know what your native language is. Um, but for me, for English speakers like me, and my family and everyone that I know, like in real life, this e sounds in between feet and fate, in between these two things. So I think more likely it's going to be confused with feet as opposed to fate. But and the same is true for uh, for the word boat, which is written like this. It sounds a lot like boot, boot, boot. But then it also sounds kind of like boat, and that's because that a is actually lower. It's over here, whereas the German a is up here. So there is a difference. Um, it doesn't show them the diphthong on that phone chart, but um,
Gotte.
and some of these forms I had to go find archaic ones, because it's it's kind of hard to. I mean, maybe I'd be able to find words that aren't archaic, but it's just faster to just say, oh well, it's goat versus goat, and uh, these words have like different declensions and everything. So gota is actually the nominative.
Gothe. Gothe. Gotte.
Um, so if you're like if you have the same uh accent as me, you do not have this sound. That's not a sound. So it probably sounds most like this, like in cot. That's there's no long a here. Like I think I said that. Um, and let's go to Stadt,
Stadt.
and maybe you can hear that it's short.
Staat, Staat,
Staat. Staat.
Um, Another thing to keep in mind that's different about German than Gothic is, for example, I'll see if I can think of a. Well, actually, Rode is corresponds to the German Gute, and you might notice that it's an A here and an E here, but the E actually represents a schwa. The A, however, does not represent a schwa. At least if it does, then we don't really know that because it's just written like an A, which would indicate, that it's pronounced, somewhere here, um, or even somewhere here. It it's really hard to tell the exact location, but I would aim for around here. Um, what's another good example? Um, I'll try to find a word that exists in like Gothic and German. Um, it's surprisingly difficult. There's only 73 words. I don't really know. I think this is in German. But as you can see, it ends in a schwa, whereas the Gothic ends in an o. And Gothic actually can have long vowels in any syllable, regardless of whether it's stressed. Whereas if you look at German Bahnhof, it has two long vowels, but both vowels are stressed. This Bahn has primary stress, and the Hof has secondary stress. So that's what you would find in a compound word. And Gothic does have a lot of compound words, but even when it's not the stressed syllable, um, it just doesn't have primary or secondary stress. It can still have a long vowel, and that's something that's extra tricky. Is that even if you speak a language with long vowels, like most of them don't have long vowels in syllables that don't have any stress. Well, I shouldn't say most of them. I have no idea whether it's most of them. At least most of the you know languages that I know that have long vowels, like for example Italian. Italian, I'm pretty sure the long vowels are only in stressed syllables and when not followed by a geminated consonant, and the stressed syllables are always either long or followed by a geminated consonant. So, and I think some other languages are the same. Swedish might be like that. I haven't studied Swedish, but I think I remember hearing something like that. Anyways, I'm going to try to record myself making a distinction between these two Stadt versus Staat. Stadt, Staat. And Stadt, Staat. I I feel like I'm saying the second one too long.
Staat,
Stadt,
Staat,
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 Stadt, Staat, Stadt, Staat. I have no idea if I'm doing that correctly, but which button is the one I want? Um, okay, here. And here you can see here's the short one, here's the long one. Um, Stadt, Staat, Stadt, Staat, Stadt, Staat, Stadt, Staat. It appears like I said this one a lot louder. I have no idea why. Um, so let's see this. I would say it's 0.15 around about in length. This is I can't tell. It might be the same. I really can't tell. Um, Mann, Bahnhof. Mann, Bahnhof. Mann, Bahnhof. Mann, Bahnhof. I'm going to try to play at point 0.5. Bahnhof, Bahnhof. So here you can hear the b. Bahnhof, Bahnhof. I'm going to keep Bahnhof, Bahnhof, Bahnhof. Okay, so Bahnhof, 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 Bahnhof. So it starts around here, and then I guess it goes to here. So around here, and then goes to here. So again, I'd say that's a distinction about 1.5, and let's go to point 8, 0.8. Mann, Bahnhof, Mann, Bahnhof. Slightly later. Mann, Bahnhof, Mann, Bahnhof. Mann, Bahn, Bahn. Oh crap! I went to 0.97. Mann, 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 Mann. That's about 1.12. Which isn't really shorter. I mean, not really that much. Um, but
Staat,
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 Staat. I wonder if it'll actually pick that up.
Staat, Staat, Staat,
No, it didn't pick it up, but whatever. I think that's enough for today. But really, ideally, it should be about that long, for the long vowels.